Now, let me just make clear that Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla and Godzilla against Mechagodzilla are two different movies, and none of those four titular characters are at all the same character. Welcome to Kaiju Movies. It only gets more confusing from there, but you don't need to be an expert in any kind of Godzilla's bizarre lore to understand the poetic value and impact of my favorite kaiju across any iteration, Mechagodzilla. It's hard to go wrong with the metal-plated doppelganger of any famous hero, and there's a lot more to Mechagodzilla than sheer rule of cool, and I want to explore that today. And that is best illustrated by the divide in character and yet resonating meaning between the original Mechagodzilla and his most contemporary successor. Mechagodzilla made his debut in 1974's Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla, the 13th endeavor of the King of the Monsters by this point, giving the character ample time to develop as a monster of many layers. There are many interpretations and incarnations of Godzilla, but what should be more or less universally understood is that Godzilla isn't fully evil in most forms. The capacity to which Godzilla particularly cares for humans and their welfare can vary depending on who's writing and which era we're in. But more often than not, despite his penchant for destructive rampages and collateral damage, Godzilla has a heart and a soft spot for some of his fellow monsters, if not the occasional human. Mankind is usually only at his mercy if they somehow provoke him. And while he may not go out of his way to save them, the human race owes Godzilla a great debt for the genuinely malicious monsters he has run out of town. That said, there's still a public image of Godzilla both in-universe and in a meta-sense that isn't incredibly flattering. He's still temperamental and responsible for a gargantuan toll of destruction, and something mankind has to be guarded against, and this is a mentality that Mechagodzilla takes advantage of in his first appearance, as Mechagodzilla's initial onslaught occurs while he's in disguise as Earth's Godzilla, deployed by his creators from the Black Hole Planet 3, wearing a cloaking prosthetic in Godzilla's visage. Mechagodzilla goes on a seemingly meaningless rampage, during which he fights and grievously injures a monster Godzilla is on good terms with, Anguirus. What's interesting about this is that not many people question it because Mechagodzilla is operating around assumptions about Godzilla being mindless and unpredictable. It's strange Godzilla would break Anguirus' jaw, but it's not super surprising because we can't read a monster's thoughts. Like a real animal, Godzilla can be beneficial one day and incredibly dangerous the next. Luckily, the illusion is broken by the arrival of the real Godzilla, prompting Mechagodzilla to relieve himself of his disguise, but this does little to disadvantage him as he's drawn to his prey and is ready to make a dent in his rival with his high-tech weaponry and advanced AI. Godzilla would be in for his greatest challenge yet, to save his planet from the might of Mechagodzilla, as well as clear his own reputation, and fittingly, he'd do this by teaming up with a monster who, unlike himself, exists and functions to go out of his way to protect humanity, King Caesar. This was the first of many instances of Mechagodzilla, an idea that would be rebuilt, appropriated, and expanded upon many times over Godzilla's long history, and many would argue it all culminated in 2002's Godzilla against Mechagodzilla. This is my personal favorite kaiju movie because it blends just about every element that makes the Godzilla formula and works it as a love letter to them. The legacies of monsters' incarnations, their relationships with humans, and the compassion that can be reached amidst the chaos and destruction kaiju leave in their wake. By now, Japan is under siege by the third monster called Godzilla, and by revisiting their history of monster attacks, the country's defense force creates a superweapon to destroy the king of the monsters once and for all. Using top researchers of every field, they unite superweapons and energy sources of top class on a portentous foundation, the unearthed skeleton of the first Godzilla, who died in 1954. The amalgamation of monster and machine would be the third Mechagodzilla, better known as Kiryu. Someone had to pilot Kiryu, and the person for the job was Akane Yashiro, a military cadet who sees this as an opportunity to glean some self-value after her life was turned upside down when she botched her duty during Godzilla's prior rampage, killing several of her peers. Akane desperately wanted a chance to redeem herself and right her wrongs. Guiding Kiryu against Godzilla would be the all-or-nothing chance to do exactly this. Kiryu absolutely had the firepower to outdo Godzilla, but things take an unexpected turn when the spirit of the first Godzilla is revealed to be dormant within Kiryu, by virtue of his bones being the structural integrity that holds Kiryu together. and awaken in the heat of battle. Akane's protocol and Kiryu's destructive bewilderment and instinct clash initially, to the point that their first attempt to defeat Godzilla must be aborted, but they grow to form a powerful bond and make an unstoppable team because they ultimately want the same thing. Godzilla has a history of divisive and dubious morality. He ultimately does good and defends Japan from rogue mutants, aliens, and robots, but he just as frequently terrorizes humanity, whether prompted into rage or by sheer collateral of his own battles. Some recognize Godzilla's well-intended acts, but many fear him. And Akane's story is very similar, a soldier whose mistakes cost many lives and caused her to be surrounded by antipathy and disrespect in her circles. What Akane and Godzilla both wanted was a chance to redeem themselves, and perform the duty of a hero successfully where they once failed to do this. And Godzilla's revival into Kiryu was the chance for them both. By teaming up to defend Japan from the new Godzilla, there was a definitive endeavor to be heroes, and they recognized this and form a perfect unity. I think it's really interesting how Mechagodzilla 3 is precisely working to relieve itself of the turmoil caused by the first Mechagodzilla, who appropriated Godzilla's appearance and identity to cause meaningless destruction. Now, the long-slumbered Godzilla, through the armored facade of the Kiryu Project, can protect mankind and help Akane bring similar redemption to herself. That said, it would be easy for Kiryu to hold nothing back and destroy his successor Godzilla once and for all, ridding the world of the monster and usurping his place as defender of Earth, but even he seems aware that this isn't the answer. After fighting to a draw, Godzilla and Kiryu meet once more in the direct sequel to Against Mechagodzilla, Tokyo SOS. This film is largely a more decisive rematch between the two, but with interference from Mothra in the mix, sent by her fairy benefactors to restore natural balance, as the presence of two Godzillas is a notion that violates nature, and rather than try to secure a position as the definitive Godzilla and damning his twin to death, Kiryu seemingly agrees and approaches the situation with what can only be described as brutal grace. Kiryu had his chance to be seen as the hero and redeem himself, but he knew that the new Godzilla would never have the same chance if they remained in opposition. To that end, Kiryu subdues Godzilla with Mothra's help and sends him back to the sea pacifistically, and then falls apart in the ocean himself, returning the original Godzilla to his initial resting place. Kiryu took pity on the new Godzilla because he was a rampaging beast once too, and he knows that Earth's defender will rise to the occasion, but only if given the chance, which he can't have if he's destroyed, and so Kiryu uses his gift of second life to bestow the very same thing to his heir, who would fight once more in Godzilla Final Wars in opposition of a whole slew of sinister monsters, despite his grudge against humanity. The stories of Godzilla place mankind as spectators looking into the impenetrable minds and hierarchy of monsters we can't speak to or understand, but Mechagodzilla was the link to entry for the puny humans. Whether built by wicked aliens or the world government, Mechagodzilla was our means to fight against or alongside the towering kaiju that see us as little more than ants on a battlefield, and it's in this way that Mechagodzilla fuses the human and monstrous elements of kaiju storytelling and makes it accessible from every capacity, and all of this is punctuated by the phenomenal and, dare I say, emotional arc of Kiryu, the perfect kaiju redemption story. As Godzilla is being rebooted and reimagined here in the States, I don't think anything resembling Kiryu would have the same impact or even practicality without his history built over decades of Japanese film, but that's okay because identities of Mechagodzilla have been malleable and reflective of their respective era. So wherever the future takes Mechagodzilla, I'm incredibly interested to bear witness.